Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more trope talk. This time, Evil Minion by Overly Sarcastic Productions. Will this one become another 1 hour long video? I hope not. That takes a lot of energy. I don't know if I've got that energy in me today. So we'll see how long this one goes. Evil Minions is a tough trope. I don't really use it. Well, it depends on how how Red is going to define this trope and the parameters that she personally sets around it. In my opinion, I don't really use minions, or at least I don't really like the idea of them being minions in a way. But well, let's just dive in and see what Red says about this, because I saw Azula in the fucking thumbnail of the video. And yeah, she's an evil minion uh because of Ozai, but I don't know if I have any like characters in my stories that are like that.
This video is sponsored by Campfire Technology, who want to share their upcoming software, Campfire Blaze, funding on Kickstarter right now. More on that later.
Oh my god, this was back when Campfire was on Kickstarter. Oh, this video. But this video is only like 3 years old. Campfire's been around for only 3 years. This feels like they've been around for longer. Anyways.
We've talked about bad guys before. Evil emperors, fallen heroes, pure evil villains, those grand, glorious antagonists that rule with fists of iron and capes of stylishness. But who remembers the villainous proletariat? Who speaks for those working class villains, the cogs in the evil machine that keep the whole evil engine firing on all its evil cylinders? Who remembers the minions? Not those minions. Don't even think about it. So today, let's pay homage to evil minions, those unappreciated bastions of evil society that take care of all the dirty work to keep things running on the ground while the evil boss is up in the high tower dangling protagonists off cliffs or monologuing to stormy skies. Now, the trope of the evil minion is, at heart, representative of a very simple dynamic. Servitude. A villain serving another villain. The simplicity of this mechanic allows for cascading chains of minions, villains serving other villains serving evil.
But Saruman doesn't serve Sauron. I mean, in a way, that really depends on how you want to look at Saruman's character, because in a way, you could definitely argue that Saruman inadvertently serves Sauron's purpose, but Saruman wanted to usurp Sauron. Saruman wanted the ring for himself and wrest Sauron's will away from the ring so that he could claim the ring and become like the ruler of Middle Earth or whatever. But of course that's not. And then of course Sauron does serve Morgoth. It's just that when Morgoth is cast away, locked away by, I believe he's locked away by Ero Luvatar. Or does Ero actually do anything? I can't remember. It's been like over a year since I read the Silmarillion. Sauron kind of takes his charge, but he's not as dangerous as Morgoth.
Even bigger villains. While heroes often form loose ragtag bands of misfits built on found family and friendship, villains like a chain of command. It's not uncommon to learn that your Season 1 villain was actually serving an even scarier Season 2 villain the whole time, or that your evil emperor is actually carrying out the will of an evil god of some sort. Because of this simple fact, almost any character can be a minion, including full-fledged pure evil villains. All they need is a minion motivation. Why does this character serve a villain? Well, while there's a lot of leeway here, broadly the answer tends to fall into one of these categories. Loyalty, money, common or personal goals, fear, love, and coercion. Loyalty's the easy one. Sometimes the minion is just loyal to the villain for whatever reason. Maybe they're old friends, maybe the villain saved them from a bad situation and now they've got a life debt thing going, maybe it's not even explained. Whatever. Minions that are actually loyal to the villain are very valuable because they almost never turn good, which is a major risk for evil minions. If a minion doesn't obviously display another minion motivation, you can presume it's this one. Basically the default baseline as well as being the most reliable motive.
Yeah, and like that's what you see with Darth Vader up until, I mean, yeah, he reveals in episode 5 that he wants to rule the galaxy with Luke. But I think really even to episode 6, the reason why we doubt whether or not Vader will actually save Luke in the end is because the assumption of Vader's why Vader serves Palpatine. We at that point in episode 6, if you don't watch the prequels, you only watch episodes 4, 5, and 6, the assumption pretty much is Vader is purely loyal to Palpatine. There are no other minion reasons why he serves Palpatine. However, then episode 3 comes in and we get 2 other reasons. You get coercion and kind of a Stockholm syndrome kind of love, I guess. That's the right way to put it. And nowhere else to go. It largely becomes Vader's reason to sticking with Palpatine, because everyone else he cares about, he's shoved away, or has died because of his actions. So he has nowhere else to turn but Palpatine. So that's why Vader stays with Palpatine. But you just go off with the knowledge of the originals. You can only assume really that Vader has loyal to Palpatine, just cause. Which, nothing wrong with that, right? There's a reason why the originals are it's fine, you know?
Loyalty is hard to deliberately instill, so truly loyal minions should be valued by the villain. But if they aren't, sometimes the minion's loyalty will crack or something else will supersede it and they'll turn on the bad guy anyway. There's also a slight difference between personal loyalty and ideological loyalty. The minion might be loyal to the villain specifically, or they might be loyal to the cause the villain represents. Both are good. The first is slightly less likely to betray the villain right when they finally achieve their ultimate victory. Also, if this loyalty is built on a lie of some kind, the minion is liable to turn on the villain the minute they find out, so this might not be worth the risk. Money is another easy one. Some minions work for pay. Shocking, right? These minions serve their villain as mercenaries because they're professionals and it's what they do. Money-motivated minions, if they come in a group, frequently form what is known as a quirky mini-boss squad, as they will each typically possess an area of expertise that allows them to each provide a unique challenge when they inevitably fight the heroes. It's like the evil version of a 5-man band. These minions are often stronger and more competent than the average minion, which is why the villain is willing to actually pay for their services instead of just paying them and not killing them today. However, as their motivation is entirely financial, these minions stand a strong chance of switching sides if the heroes provide enough incentive. Also, sometimes a minion is working for pay but is actually motivated by something personal, like find and battle strong opponents or hurt people for fun. This isn't technically a financial motivation and instead falls under the purview of the next category, common or personal goals. Sometimes the minion has their own thing going on, and working with the villain will help them with that. These minions are volatile because they have personal priorities over the villain's priorities, and if it looks like those priorities might no longer align, they might split. Villains hate this, so personally motivated minions might not live too long after the split unless they get scooped up by some passing good guys. This minion has no direct loyalty to the villain, but because of that, these minions are typically top tier because the only reason the villain would keep this volatile minion around is because they do good work. Personally motivated minions also stand a strong chance of spiraling off into their own character arc if they successfully slip away from the villain. But in order to keep these volatile minions in line, sometimes the villains will supplement their personal motivation with the next category, fear. Villains love this one because it's easy. If the villain's got the oomph to pull it off, it's not hard to keep.
But also, like, if you can do it well, it's like the best one, because it becomes twofold. That's one of the ones that becomes kind of twofold with its purpose with how it serves the story. If you do the fear right, one, you make the audience also fear the villain so that they aren't just afraid of the villain when it comes to the minions' loyalty to the villain because they fear him, but then you also are worried for the protagonist because you have been so successfully afraid of the villain, right? By you being successfully afraid of the villain, it's like, it does more. Which is right. It's easy to do. It's an easy one to do. It's pretty much one that you default to, I would say. But and it's because it's also like, even if it's done poorly, it's not bad, right? It'll feel cheap, but it's just it doesn't like necessarily ruin the story, like, because it's a good one. I don't know, in my opinion, it's such a good one, right? I want my villain to be scary, I want to be afraid of the fucking villain. So even if you do a bad job at making him afraid, making the fear truly believable, there's still something there, right? Well, and again, in stories, a lot of the time, I'm someone that can appreciate the attempt of the storyteller. Like if I can see what the storyteller was trying to do, I tend to give a lot of leeway. Because well, one, writing stories is fucking hard. So like, as long as you know you're a competent, it feels mean to say it this way, but I can't really think of any other way to phrase it. As long as you're like a competent enough writer where I can tell the direction, the vision, the ideas that you had, that where you were kind of wanting your story to go, things that you were wanting to do with it. If I can see that, but it may not have hit the mark, I will be more lenient in it. Um, like trying to think of a good example, but I can't really think of one. Um, huh. I mean, I think I'll give a different example from a different kind of trope. I'm gonna use George R. R. Martin because there one of George's themes within his story is, he's anti-war, and he is also like he's pretty anti-violence. I think him as a person for the most part, because he protested the Vietnam War, so he's definitively anti-war. Um, I don't know if if he's a pacifist though, but he's also one of the things is he is a feminist, I guess if we want to use that term. Although that term gets thrown around in so many different ways now that I don't know like really if it's the best word to use. But of course, then within his books, violence towards women is very prominent. And there are valid criticisms at it, and uh, the way in which he uses it. But ultimately, his, you know, goal there is no. This is a bad example. Um, shit. Damn, I really can't think of a good example for this. Because really, I don't really like to consume too many things. Oh, Legend of Korra. There we fucking go. Legend of Korra has some genuinely great ideas within it, uh, and I can see what they were wanting to do with it. However, because of one Nickelodeon being a piece of shit to the creators of Avatar, um, Korra did not was only renewed for was only given a season 1. So of course they didn't do any much planning for successive seasons, and then they got renewed for a season 2, but were not renewed for a season 3 or 4 until after season 2 had aired, and then they were like, okay, here's season 3 and 4. But then Nickelodeon didn't even air season 3 and 4 on television, they just put it online. But also that's why season 3 and 4 of Korra have a more connected storyline as compared to seasons 1 and 2. Although my personal favorite season of Korra was season 1, because I really liked Amon as a villain. I thought that was really cool. And then of course you can kind of tell that season 1 was really the only plan because of the way that they have Korra's character start. Korra's already mastered, you know, she already mastered fire, water, and earth by the time she's 16, which of course, is fine. Aang mastered air by the time he was 12. He mastered water within a year of coming out of the iceberg. He never mastered fire, and he didn't master fire and earth by the end of the show, but he got pretty competent. He got pretty damn good at them. But as we see with Last Airbender, Aang learns water bending in season 1, and then he starts to learn fire bending in season 1 as well, but fails at it, and then doesn't touch it again until season 3. And then season 2, he's learning earth bending. Yeah, season 2, he's learning earth bending. Season 3, he learns fire bending. they met Toph in season 2. They didn't get Toph in season 1. So yeah, like in that you see, like, for me, Avatar kind of does that thing where the Avatar is learning the elements with each season, you know? And that's kind of how I view it. I'm curious how they're going to do the upcoming animated series that they plan for the Earthbending Avatar that will be taking place after Korra. Curious if they'll have a guaranteed multiple seasons or not. Anyways, that's
keep minions in line
tangent
through fear.
for.
It's only stable for as long as the villain is fearsome, though.
Oh yeah. Anyways, originally, as I was saying, there are things that happen within Korra that I can see that the writers wanted to take, but maybe they just slipped up, or they really couldn't go as deep into them as they may have wanted to. Like, I think we can say for certain. Now I don't know if from the beginning they were wanting Korra and Asami to be a thing, but in the comics that's become a thing, and of course they hinted at it with the end at season 4 with them holding hands because Nickelodeon wouldn't let them kiss. At least that's the information I've heard when in regards to the development of Korra. So I'm curious, like, with that information, with that outside information present in my mind, I can see what you wanted to do with it, but tonally things were kind of slippery, didn't exactly mesh well. Storyline season 2 was a complete bore fest for me. But yeah. Oh, the Hobbit movies, the Hobbit trilogy. After watching, they have a special place in my heart. I enjoy them. They're a good time. They're fun. They're schlocky as fuck. It's not a Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it is fun time. It is not a faithful adaptation whatsoever. I've read The Hobbit multiple times. I definitely prefer the book to the movies, but whereas with Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna be honest, I prefer the movies to the books in that aspect, just for those. And so, you know, I can see, especially when you watch the behind the scenes documentaries for the Hobbit movies, you see the problems that Peter Jackson had, and also maybe you also hear some of his thoughts. He speaks about some of the ideas that he had, also just the struggles of it, and so it's led me to appreciate those movies more. But yeah, as long as I can really tell, like, where you're wanting to take something, I'm more lenient. And like, even without the behind the scenes documentaries on The Hobbit, I can see some ideas that Jackson wanted to take the Hobbit trilogy, or what was originally supposed to be a duology, but ultimately did not come to be, or was just not executed properly.
And if the villain loses that for some reason, they might start hemorrhaging minions. This one is also useful because it can easily supplement other motivations. Maybe the minion is ideologically loyal to the villain, but if that cracks, they're still too afraid to break rank. This is frequently how the villain keeps the grunt minions in line. Any minion that fears the villain is by default less impressive than a minion with personal gravitas that treats the villain more like a peer or a respected superior. But if an actually scary villain is genuinely afraid of the villain they serve, that definitely boosts the fearful factor. Now, love. This one's complicated. Sometimes a minion loves the villain, and whether or not the villain loves them back, they'll still do what they want. Sometimes the villain actively encourages this by sort of leading them on, or in some cases going full-on abusive parent or partner, manipulating or gaslighting the minion by leveraging that love. These minions are usually tragic figures, especially in the cases where the villain is someone like a parent who really should love them and value their life, but doesn't.
Yep.
In terms of skill level, these minions are generally mid-tier. The villain keeps them around because they're unrelentingly loyal, not because they're the best of the best. If the minion goofs up enough, the villain might decide it's time for them to go, which is always a very tragic moment when the minion in love realizes that the villain only indulged them because they were useful. And finally, coercion. Sometimes, to keep a minion in line, the villain needs some kind of leverage. Blackmail and brainwashing might be involved. This is usually restricted to very valuable minions the villain really wants to keep around for whatever reason. These minions will split at the first opportunity and will frequently try and take out the villain themselves. A risky play, but some minions are really worth the trouble. But this does bring up the question, why does the villain villain even bother to have minions? In universe, the reasons are usually pretty simple. Minions get odd jobs done, they broaden what the villain is capable of, they make it easier to accomplish wide-scale villainy, stuff like that. But there are also major narrative benefits the writer might find very useful. For one, finding out that the villain who's been giving you so much trouble is actually just the small potatoes minion to a much bigger villain is a good way to escalate the stakes, though this does actually depend on why the minion villain follows this broader scope villain. If they're just loyal to their cause, that doesn't actually tell you anything about the villain they serve. But if the broader scope villain is keeping the minion villain in line through fear, that suggests they're a much bigger threat to your heroes than the minion villain was. Another big benefit of minions is they diversify the villain's evil portfolio. One villain can really only do so much, but an entire villainous chain of command can have a lot of specialized bad guys on the payroll. And of course, since the key to a successful evil venture is delegation, it makes sense that your boss villain would want to find the right minion for the job. Maybe your heroes need hunting down by a super persistent silent assassin, or an enemy government needs infiltrating by a shape-shifting master manipulator, or you just need your biggest, dumbest minion to go punch a hole in something. A villain shouldn't be expected to do everything themselves, it's demeaning, and they've got better, more important things to do. In fact, the mere existence of a villain's minions communicates very clearly to the audience that the villain does have more important things to do than tangle with the heroes whenever they pop up to cause trouble. There's a lot to be said for a villain who has higher priorities than fighting the heroes. Kinda shakes up the assumption that the heroes are the center of the story. So throwing in a posse of specialized evil minions to take care of delegated villainy really helps get across that this is a villain with their act together and their own thing going on. But that's not the only benefit. See, because of the role they play in the story, villains often get a little flattened in the characterization department. They're defined by their dynamic with the heroes, which is usually pretty simple. They're an antagonist. They oppose the heroes. There's room for nuance, but not all that much. But this can be counterbalanced by showing us how the villain interacts with people they don't ideologically oppose. A villain's dynamic with their minions can show us who they really are, outside the moral dichotomy that makes up the hero-villain conflict. And this can be a very juicy source of characterization. For example, let's look at Fire Lord Ozai from Avatar: The Last Airbender. On paper, this guy is a pretty standard issue evil overlord. He's trying to conquer the world and/or burn it to the ground. He's got a fleet of zeppelins, an army of faceless minions, a sinister cape, and a very fetching hairdo. He's not even fully seen on screen for 41 episodes, and even after that, we basically only see him either getting ready for war or hucking fireballs at Aang. He's basically a non-entity in the character department, except for the fact that every important aspect of his character can be inferred from his dynamic with his children, Zuko and Azula, who both spend at least some of the series serving Ozai in a minion capacity. Long before we ever meet Ozai, we learn exactly what kind of father he is when Iroh tells us how Ozai publicly mutilated his own teenage son for objecting to a tactical decision that would have resulted in the loss of an entire division of new recruits. This little tidbit already speaks volumes about his character, but the more we learn about Ozai,
and it serves like three different purposes, this scene that she's talking about here. We learn about Iroh and how he loves Zuko like a son. We learn Zuko's personality as someone that actually cares about the people beneath him, despite him being originally the crown heir to the Fire Nation. He genuinely cares about people beneath him. And then we also learn Fire Lord Ozai doesn't give a fucking shit about people, even his own family. It's one quick scene, really kind of just a couple of lines of dialogue from Iroh, and boom, we immediately know like things about three different characters and their personality. That is genius level writing, when you can make just a couple of lines tell us so much.
Ozai and Zuko's dynamic, the worse it gets. The condition Ozai sets for Zuko's return is the capture of the Avatar, and at the time he gave him that mission, the Avatar had been missing, presumed dead, for nearly a century. Zuko took it very seriously, but Ozai was clearly sending him off on an impossible fool's errand that'd keep him disgraced and in exile until he managed to get himself killed picking a fight with whatever vastly superior benders he encountered on the way. It's very obvious that Ozai couldn't care less about his son, and even when Zuko is allowed to return to the Fire Nation, Ozai acts like nothing happened and barely interacts with him. We already know we should hate this guy full seasons before we ever see him, purely because of the impact he had on Zuko. And it's only made worse when we meet Azula, the other byproduct of Ozai's stellar parenting, whose upbringing has left her with a fascinating cocktail of issues that a psychologist might refer to as a piping hot mess. Thanks to Ozai, Azula believes that the only thing in life that matters is control, and thus she struggles in every single social interaction, either trying to maintain an iron grip on the situation or completely falling apart when things don't go her way. Because if things aren't going her way, it means she's failing, and if she's failing, that makes her a failure, just like Zuko. The most terrifying thing she can think of is being treated by her father the way he treats her brother. Azula is a terrifying weapon of war, but she's also a lonely 14-year-old with a ton of issues and no concept of healthy social relationships. Where Zuko had developmental help in the form of his mother, Uncle Iroh, and the good guy gang to help pry him out of his shell and give him some sense of personal worth, Azula just had the transactional approval of her
Cat 9 need to rewatch Avatar.
distant father and her girl posse, and she had to coerce
I
those
love
two
this
into
show
helping
so
her out,
much,
which
man.
of course made perfect sense to her control-centric worldview, but also made it very easy for them to turn on her when they got priorities more important than fearing her. And in the finale, we even see that Ozai discards her the minute his personal goals are in reach. He crowns her Fire Lord and then grounds her at home while he crowns himself super cool God Emperor of everything and takes off on his blimp to burn the world down. He wants this victory to be only his, and he wants it to be absolute, so he gives his most loyal minion a token participation ribbon and immediately invalidates it by pulling the rug out from under her new title and abandoning her to take the win for himself. Ozai's dynamic with his children speaks volumes about his character and makes him stunningly easy to hate, despite how little of his character we actually see on screen. But giving us a good minion-villain dynamic doesn't always serve to make the villain extra hateable. In some cases, it actually foreshadows that the villain might not be all that bad. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood gives us a pretty good example that's a bit of a spoiler, so skip ahead if you're dodging those, when our heroes meet the homunculus Greed. Now this happens pretty early on, but at this point we've already seen a number of homunculi. We know they're themed around the 7 deadly sins, they work for this spooky mystery man, and they are extremely evil. They're largely unkillable with unique body horror powers, and they've got some kind of evil plan we're not privy to yet. At this point in the story, we don't fully know what they want or who all of them are, but the ones we've seen have no qualms about torturing, killing, and in one case, eating random humans. They're bad, is what I'm saying. But then, one of our heroes gets kidnapped by the homunculus Greed, who's pretty affable, if utterly self-centered, and he happens to have a merry band of misfit chimeras on his payroll. Now, Greed is definitely an antagonist, but he's not working with the other homunculi, and his dynamic with his minions is actually very chill. He claims he likes them because they're his possessions, and as a personification of greed, he obviously likes everything he owns, but it's pretty clear that his posse has a bit of a "sure boss, whatever you say" attitude towards this particular explanation. They're all very loyal to him, and basically all die, sacrificing their lives for him shortly thereafter, when their secret base is attacked by the homunculus Wrath. Greed is, in turn, deeply upset at the loss of his minions. Just because they were his, you know, totally greedy, definitely didn't actually like them as people, he swears. And despite his creepy powers and his technical antagonist status, it's still pretty obvious that this is a guy who cares very deeply about the people in his life. Greed's dynamic with his minions shows us very early on that he's not like the other homunculi and that he actually cares about the people close to him, and this in turn hints that maybe he's not quite as ironclad in his villainy as the others. This is confirmed sometime later when he gets reborn without any memory, allegedly as a proper villain this time, then encounters and kills the sole survivor of his old minion troop and is immediately overwhelmed by sudden incredible guilt and pain, and by way of an explanation is helpfully informed by the person whose body he's currently inhabiting that he just killed a friend, that despite the memory wipe he can never truly forget his friends because those friends are a part of his soul. And if nothing else, his guilt and pain proves that they were more than just possessions to him. Immediately after this disturbing revelation, Greed becomes a full-on good guy. If your villain treats their minions well, it's a good indicator that they're not quite as black and white in the morality department as they maybe could be. And if your villain treats their minions badly, it helps hammer home that they're a bad
sign, like if your date mistreats the waitstaff.
person who mistreats the people they have power over and doesn't reciprocate their loyalty. But even beyond the simple morality department, a villain's dynamic with their minions lets us see who they are as a person instead of just an antagonist. The Joker's dynamic with Harley Quinn shows us that beyond being a garden variety murderer with a very goofy gimmick, the Joker is a consummate manipulator who has exactly zero qualms about leveraging Harley's love for him to get what he wants. And he's also a textbook abusive boyfriend. Mad Love does more for the Joker's characterization than the entirety of The Killing Joke. Looping back to Avatar, Ozai's dynamic with his children shows us that he has a very simple, strength-based worldview that classifies compassion and love as weaknesses and power and control as the only things that matter. Ozai is also pretty clearly a narcissist who thinks his own impressive qualities are the only good qualities: firebending talent, charismatic political power, symmetrical features, etc. This is why he lauds Azula as a poised firebending prodigy but ignores Zuko because of his comparatively unimpressive firebending, even though he demonstrates prodigious skill in almost every other form of combat. Without relying on his bending, Zuko is probably the best fighter in the series, a skill set he uses to routinely take down other benders. Basically, Ozai's an idiot for not recognizing Zuko's potential, and if he'd bothered to actually encourage Zuko's unique skill set, he could have had an incredibly effective assassin on his payroll. Also, not joking about the symmetry thing. Ozai deliberately scars Zuko only on half his face, while Azula maintains perfect symmetry in her appearance right up until her mid-finale breakdown when her Ozai-based worldview of power and control begins to crumble. Avatar is so good, you guys. So basically,
That's what I'm saying. Villain's dynamic with minions can be much more complex than with any other character. To see who someone really is, watch how they treat those they have power over. Anyone can be a minion as long as they have a minion motivation. Minions are great. Go bananas with them.
A villain's dynamic with the heroes is generally kind of flat, but their dynamic with their minions can be a lot more nuanced and give us a much better understanding of their character. Minions can be just about any character, they just need a reason to work as a minion. Minions let you diversify your antagonists and present all kinds of fun characterization opportunities. They're not necessary for every good villain, but they're definitely fun and narratively quite useful. So yeah, this video was sponsored by Blaze, a new...
Alrighty, and that was Trope Talk, Evil Minions. This was a good video. I definitely could have rambled more, but I felt like my ramblings would have been completely unrelated to the necessary trope that we were talking about, so I held back. Still a long video, 30 minutes here. Actually, that might get cut. Usually I cut out a few seconds of stuff. Not like at the beginning and ends of videos. But this might get, I don't know, around 30 minutes. Probably 30 minutes, because I'm going to ramble here. This was well made. I love these trope talks. There's a lot of them coming up because I really just want to do some trope talks right now. So I'm having a lot. These are my favorite videos to react to because they really lend themselves to something you can talk about. Because again, writing is such a subjective art form. Like when it comes to history, it's a lot harder to talk about and discuss things. Like we can talk about what ifs, but that doesn't necessarily add really anything. And so if it's not and it's impossible to be well learned on every single fucking thing that I'm reacting to here when it comes to history. So it's so much harder to have things to discuss. Because if I were to try and just read up on things before I reacted to a certain topic, that's just going to feel disingenuous, and it's not going to feel like, in order to get the proper understanding of the historical topic, I would have to go and read primary sources and sources from modern historians. And the only way to really then get the information timely is to read Wikipedia. And if I just read Wikipedia, I'm going to be missing out on so much. I'm going to be missing out on a lot of nuance. Because while I do believe Wikipedia is good for general information, you are not going to get nuance and an understanding of what the people living in that time period may have been feeling. So that's why these videos are typically a lot longer than my history reactions, because there just really isn't much for me to theorize about or speculate about, because tropes are very subjective. What works for me may not work for you, or we may have one trope that works for us similarly, but then we have another trope that we disagree on. Whereas history, for the most part, is fact. Aside from you can speculate on certain fates of certain historical figures, speculate on some of their thoughts based on maybe some letters or other things you've seen them do, right? We can infer Abraham Lincoln's opinions on race based on letters that he wrote, things that he did while in office. We have a bunch of that stuff, right? We can infer, we can make assumptions there, but we cannot make an inference on the results of the on the Civil War. We know what the results were of the Civil fucking War. So there's just less really to talk about when it comes to history videos, because history videos tend to present themselves and only really discuss fact rather than discussing the subtle nuances that come from reading firsthand accounts. Because also, if history documentaries here on YouTube were to do that, they would be uploaded way less frequently than they are, in my opinion. So yeah, but here with Trope Talks, it's super easy to just add ramblings and tangents here and find things to talk about and discuss, because again, super subjective. There's no fact when it comes to writing. It's all just, how you feel. And of course, there are certain things that typically, historically, um, our our brains, I guess, enjoy more when it comes to our stories. That's why certain tropes are way more popular than other tropes, you know, because that seems to be what humans enjoy most, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, don't know if that rambling there at the end made any sense, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.